Did the 1990s secretly bury some of its wildest action cartoons? While everyone still talks about Batman and X-Men, dozens of darker, stranger, and more ambitious shows were left behind, like broken toys in a forgotten Saturday morning battlefield. Some had space wars, mutant monsters, cyberpunk heroes, and endings that never came. Today, we're digging up 15 action cartoons that deserved louder praise, and one of them may shock you. Extreme Dinosaurs, 1997. This was the kind of cartoon that looked ridiculous for 5 seconds, and then somehow became impossible to ignore. Extreme Dinosaurs arrived in 1997 with one of the most aggressively 90s concepts ever put on television. Genetically enhanced dinosaurs acting like a biker gang while trying to stop evil raptors from overheating the planet. On paper, it sounds like pure toy shelf madness, but that is exactly what gives the show its strange, forgotten charm. It was loud, colorful, muscular, and completely unashamed of its own insanity. The heroes, led by T-Bone, were not just dinosaurs with attitude. They were action figures brought to life with motorcycles, sunglasses, one-liners, and environmental stakes. The villains, the raptors, wanted to make Earth warmer so reptiles could dominate, which gave the show a surprisingly clear threat behind all the chaos. It spun out of the Street Sharks universe, but never gained the same nostalgic recognition. That makes it a perfect forgotten pick. Silly enough to laugh at, energetic enough to remember, and weird enough to feel like a lost fossil from the peak era of cartoon excess. Toxic Crusaders, 1991. Only the 90s could take a grotesque cult movie mutant and turn him into a Saturday morning environmental hero. Toxic Crusaders came along in 1991, transforming the bizarre world of Trauma's adult cult film The Toxic Avenger into a kid-friendly action cartoon about pollution, mutation, and strange heroism. The result was one of the weirdest action shows of the decade. Its main hero, Toxie, was a mutated janitor with a mop, a melted face, and a team of equally odd companions fighting villains who wanted to poison the planet. It sounds absurd because it absolutely was, but beneath the slime and monster jokes, the show tapped into a very real early 90s anxiety, toxic waste, corporate greed, dirty cities, and environmental collapse. Instead of polished superheroes, it gave kids a squad of misfits who looked like they crawled out of a chemical spill and decided to save the world anyway. It did not last long, but that short run made it even more cult-like. This was not sleek superhero action. It was messy, mutant, and proudly ugly. And that is why it still feels unforgettable. Mummies Alive, 1997. Ancient Egypt, modern streets, magical armor, and a reincarnated child king. This show had no business being this stylish. Mummies Alive entered the 90s action wave in 1997, bringing a strange but addictive mix of mythology, superhero teamwork, and toy-driven spectacle. The story followed 4 ancient Egyptian warriors resurrected in modern San Francisco to protect Presley, a young boy believed to be the reincarnation of their pharaoh. That setup instantly gave the cartoon something many action shows lacked: a built-in sense of destiny. Every episode felt like the past was breaking through the present, with cursed villains, magical weapons, and armored transformations turning ordinary city life into a supernatural battlefield. The main threat, Scarab, was not just another cartoon villain. He was a power-hungry sorcerer chasing immortality, which gave the show a darker edge under its flashy surface. It clearly wanted to sell toys, but it also built a world full of symbols, rituals, and ancient rivalries. It never became a giant franchise, yet it left behind a strong visual memory. Forgotten? Yes. Boring? Not for a second. Bucky O'Hare and the Toad Wars, 1991. Before every cartoon needed a massive cinematic universe, one green rabbit was already fighting an intergalactic empire. Bucky O'Hare and the Toad Wars blasted onto screens in 1991, based on the cult comic about a heroic space captain battling the oppressive Toad Empire. It had everything a young action fan could want: laser battles, strange planets, animal warriors, evil armies, and a crew that felt like a Saturday morning version of a rebel resistance. Bucky himself was not just a funny animal mascot. He was a confident, sharp-eyed commander leading a team through a surprisingly large sci-fi world. The show's universe was packed with personality, from the Aniverse setting to the Toad villains ruled by a sinister computer intelligence. It mixed comedy with danger, but the stakes were always clear: freedom versus control. That is what made it stand out. It looked colorful and playful, yet underneath it was a classic war against empire story. Its short life kept it from becoming a mainstream legend, but for those who caught it, Bucky O'Hare felt bigger than its episode count. This was forgotten space opera with real Saturday morning swagger. Wild CATS, Covert Action Teams, 1994. This was the 90s comic book boom, squeezed into one loud, strange, alien war cartoon. Wild CATS, Covert Action Teams arrived in 1994 during the era when every network wanted its own superhero team with sharp costumes, big muscles, and mysterious backstories. Based on the Image comic series, it followed a group of superpowered warriors caught in an ancient interstellar conflict between the heroic cherubim and the villainous demonites. That mythology gave the show more ambition than viewers might expect from a short-lived action cartoon. It was not simply heroes punch villains. It had secret identities, alien infiltration, centuries-old war, and a team dynamic built around loyalty, rivalry, and hidden power. Visually, it carried the exaggerated energy of 90s comics. Huge shoulders, dramatic poses, glowing weapons, and characters who looked like they were designed to leap off trading cards. Did it fully reach the depth of its source material? Not always, but that is part of its forgotten charm. It was bold, messy, over-designed, and completely committed to its own mythology. In a decade crowded with superhero giants, Wild CATS became the loud underdog that almost broke through. Street Sharks, 1994. Four brothers became mutant sharks, and somehow that was one of the most perfect action cartoon ideas of the decade. Street Sharks stormed into the 90s in 1994, riding the same mutant hero wave that made kids obsessed with anything muscular, monstrous, and ready to shout a catchphrase. The setup was pure comic book chaos. Four athletic brothers are transformed into half-human, half-shark warriors after a genetic experiment, then battle-mad scientists, mutant enemies, and corporate-style villains. But the reason Street Sharks still sticks in people's minds is not subtle storytelling, it is pure visual impact. These characters looked like action figures before they even moved. Giant jaws, ripped bodies, rollerblades, motorcycles, and names like Ripster, Jab, Streaks, and Big Slamu. It was absurd, yes, but it understood exactly what young viewers wanted: speed, attitude, transformation, and monsters who felt like heroes instead of nightmares. The show was clearly built for merchandise, yet its energy made it more than a toy commercial. It became a time capsule of 90s excess. If subtle cartoons aged gracefully, Street Sharks aged like a neon explosion, ridiculous, unforgettable, and proudly radical. Biker Mice from Mars, 1993. This was not just a cartoon about alien mice on motorcycles, it was a full-speed rebellion wearing leather jackets. Biker Mice from Mars hit the 90s with the kind of wild confidence that made the decade feel untouchable. The story followed Throttle, Moto, and Vinny, three motorcycle-riding humanoid mice who escape their ruined home planet of Mars and land in Chicago, only to discover that Earth is being threatened by the same kind of greedy, destructive enemies who devastated their world. That gave the show more weight than its ridiculous title suggested. Beneath the jokes, bikes, and big action scenes was a simple but effective theme: outsiders fighting corporate monsters before another planet gets destroyed. The Plutarchians were not just goofy villains, they represented pollution, exploitation, and ruthless greed dressed up as cartoon evil. What made the show work was its attitude. The heroes had brotherhood, scars, humor, and a street-level coolness that felt designed for kids who wanted action with edge. It was loud, fast, and shamelessly 90s, but it had heart underneath the chrome. Forgotten by mainstream nostalgia? Maybe. But for anyone who watched it, those bikes are still roaring somewhere in memory. The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, 1996. This reboot tried to drag an old adventure hero into the digital age, and that ambition alone makes it fascinating. The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest returned in 1996 with a sleeker, more mature spin on the classic globe-trotting formula. Instead of simple jungle escapades and old-school mystery plots, this version pushed Johnny, Haji, Jesse, Race Bannon, and Dr. Quest into a world of paranormal threats, secret technology, ancient legends, and early CGI cyberspace. The big hook was Questworld, a virtual reality dimension that felt futuristic in the 90s, even when the animation now looks like a strange digital artifact. But that is part of the charm. The series was trying to feel modern before modern television fully knew what that meant. It mixed archaeology, science fiction, conspiracy, monsters, and international danger into a show that felt more serious than many kids expected. There was also a harder action tone, explosions, chases, military threats, and mysteries that sometimes leaned surprisingly dark. It did not dominate pop culture like other 90s icons, but it remains one of the decade's most ambitious reboots. Imperfect? Definitely. Forgettable? Not if you remember how boldly it tried to update adventure for a generation raised on technology and danger. Silver Surfer, 1998. Most action cartoons wanted bigger punches. This one wanted bigger questions. Silver Surfer arrived in 1998, and instead of copying the usual superhero formula, it reached for something stranger, colder, and more cosmic. The show followed Norrin Radd, the tragic space wanderer who becomes the Silver Surfer after serving the world-devouring Galactus. That setup instantly separated it from the usual hero versus villain rhythm. This was not just about stopping bad guys, it was about guilt, freedom, loneliness, memory, and the terrifying scale of the universe. The animation style gave it a glowing, almost mythic look, with cosmic backgrounds, alien civilizations, and characters who felt pulled from Grand Jack Kirby-inspired space opera. For younger viewers, it may have seemed slower or more philosophical than expected, but that is exactly why it stands out now. It treated its audience like they could handle tragedy and wonder at the same time. Sadly, the series ended too soon, leaving its larger story unfinished. That cancellation only adds to its cult reputation. Silver Surfer was not the loudest Marvel cartoon of the 90s, but it may have been one of the boldest. It looked past Earth and asked what heroism means when the universe itself feels broken. Cyber 6, 1999. Some forgotten cartoons feel like toys from the past. This one feels like a secret broadcast from another world. Cyber 6 appeared in 1999, and even today it feels unusually stylish, moody, and mature for a late 90s action series. Based on the Argentine comic, the show followed Cyber 6, a genetically engineered woman who disguises herself by day and battles the monstrous creations of her former creator by night. That premise already carried a darker emotional charge than most Saturday morning cartoons. She was not simply fighting villains, she was fighting the system that made her, hunted her, and tried to erase her humanity. The show's atmosphere was its strongest weapon. Rooftops, shadows, rain-soaked streets, gothic architecture, and noir-style tension made every episode feel different from the louder, toy-driven action shows around it. There was also a strange elegance to Cyber 6 herself. Powerful but lonely, heroic but haunted, graceful but dangerous. For kids, it was mysterious. For older viewers, it had identity, trauma, and survival under the surface. It never became a massive mainstream hit, partly because it was too unusual to fit neatly into the cartoon machine, but that is exactly why it deserves rediscovery. Cyber 6 was not trying to be ordinary action. It was stylish, strange, and quietly unforgettable. SWAT Kats, The Radical Squadron, 1993. This cartoon did not tiptoe into action. It launched missiles, fired up a jet engine, and blasted straight through Saturday morning television. SWAT Kats, The Radical Squadron came roaring in 1993, giving viewers one of the most high-energy action setups of the decade. The show followed T-Bone and Razor, two former law enforcement pilots who are demoted after a mission goes wrong, then secretly become masked vigilantes defending Mega Cat City with their custom fighter jet, the Turbo Cat. That single idea was already irresistible. Disgraced heroes, secret identities, aerial combat, mutant monsters, and enough gadgets to make every episode feel like a mini-action movie. What made SWAT Kats special was its heavier tone. Mega Cat City was constantly under attack from criminals, supernatural villains, radioactive creatures, and science experiments gone wrong. The show had a darker industrial look, a pounding rock-inspired energy, and action scenes that felt sharper than many cartoons aimed at kids. It did not last as long as fans wanted, which only strengthened its cult status. In another timeline, SWAT Kats could have become one of the defining action franchises of the 90s. Instead, it became something more mysterious, a canceled classic that still feels cooler than half the shows that outlived it. The Pirates of Dark Water, 1991. Some cartoons ended too soon, but this one felt like someone tore the final chapters out of an epic fantasy novel. The Pirates of Dark Water arrived in 1991 with a world that felt bigger, stranger, and more dangerous than most Saturday morning adventures dared to be. Instead of simple villains and easy victories, it followed Prince Ren on a desperate quest across the alien world of Mer, searching for the lost treasures of Rule before the mysterious dark water consumed everything. That single idea gave the show a constant sense of urgency. The ocean was not just scenery, it was a living threat, spreading like corruption across the planet. Ren's crew, the fierce Tula, the roguish pirate Ios, and the loyal monkey bird Niddler, gave the journey humor, conflict, and real adventure chemistry. Every island felt like it had its own curse, monster, or secret waiting in the shadows. The animation carried a cinematic fantasy mood, full of strange creatures, stormy seas, ancient ruins, and villains who felt genuinely dangerous. But the cruelest twist is that the story was never properly finished. For fans, that unfinished ending became part of the legend. The Pirates of Dark Water is forgotten by casual viewers, but for anyone who remembers it, it remains one of the greatest what-could-have-been cartoons of the 90s. Gargoyles, 1994. This was Disney pretending to make a superhero cartoon, while secretly building a gothic crime saga about betrayal, exile, and revenge. Gargoyles came in 1994, and it immediately felt different from the bright, safe image people often associated with Disney television. The story began with ancient Scottish gargoyles betrayed by humans, frozen in stone for 1,000 years, and awakened in modern New York City. That opening alone gave the series a tragic weight most action cartoons never reached. Goliath and his clan were not just monster heroes, they were displaced warriors trying to understand a world that had moved on without them. The city became their new castle, the night became their battlefield, and every episode carried a mood of myth crashing into modern crime. What made the show powerful was its seriousness. It pulled from Shakespeare, medieval legend, science fiction, corporate corruption, organized crime, and family loyalty without talking down to its audience. Villains like David Xanatos were not simple cartoon bad guys. They were intelligent, manipulative, and dangerously calm. The action mattered because the emotions underneath felt real. While animation fans still praise it, mainstream nostalgia often leaves it behind Batman and X-Men. That is a mistake. Gargoyles was not just good for a kid's show, it was one of the most ambitious action dramas of the decade. Exo Squad, 1993. While other cartoons sold battles, this one sold consequences, and that made it feel almost dangerous. Exo Squad began in 1993, and it remains one of the most mature animated war stories ever made for young audiences. Set in a future where humanity clashes with the genetically engineered Neo-Sapiens, the show did not treat war as a colorful game. It treated it as politics, rebellion, occupation, survival, and moral compromise. That is what made it so unusual. Characters changed, alliances shifted, people died, victories came with damage. Villains were not always mindless monsters, and heroes were not always clean. The series used armored exoframes, space battles, military tactics, and planetary conflict, but its real power came from the writing. It understood that war is not just explosions. It is fear, leadership, prejudice, propaganda, and the cost of decisions made under pressure. For a 90s action cartoon, that was shockingly bold. It asked viewers to follow a serialized storyline long before many children's shows trusted audiences with that kind of continuity. Maybe that is why it never became as famous as the louder franchises around it. Exo Squad was not built for easy nostalgia. It was built like a sci-fi war novel disguised as a toy-driven cartoon, and that makes its forgotten status feel almost criminal. Roughnecks, Starship Troopers Chronicles, 1999. This was not a cute Saturday morning adventure. It was a war report from the edge of alien hell. Roughnecks, Starship Troopers. Chronicles closed out the decade in 1999 with a bold experiment, a fully CGI military sci-fi cartoon based on the Starship Troopers universe. Instead of copying the film's satirical bite completely, the series focused on squad-based survival, battlefield pressure, alien invasions, and soldiers learning that every mission could turn into a disaster. The Roughnecks were not invincible heroes posing for toy boxes. They were a unit fighting through fear, confusion, and impossible odds against the insect-like arachnids. That gave the show a harder tactical edge than most cartoons of its time. Missions unfolded like campaigns, with different planets, shifting objectives, dangerous terrain, and a constant sense that the enemy was evolving. The early CGI may look dated now, but in the late 90s, it gave the show a strange, futuristic identity. It felt colder, harsher, and more mechanical than traditional animation, which actually suited the war zone atmosphere. Sadly, production problems and an unfinished final arc left the series feeling like another ambitious project cut down before its full potential. But that is exactly why it earns the top spot. Roughnecks was risky, intense, and weirdly ahead of its time, a forgotten action cartoon that fought bigger than almost anything around it. And that is what makes these 90s action cartoons so fascinating. They were loud, strange, risky, sometimes messy, but never boring. While Batman and X-Men took the spotlight, these forgotten shows built their own wild little universes in the shadows. Some ended too soon. Some deserved bigger fan bases, but all of them prove one thing: Saturday morning action was far deeper than we remember.